For those of you who are not aware of British politics and the ongoing politicking that's happening in the UK, or maybe you just don't pay enough attention to what's going on in politics closely enough to observe this, but you may or may not be aware that the Conservative Party has now split into different factions, where once the ERG was the party within the party, there are now parties within the party. We have again, the European Research Group is still there. We have the COVID Recovery Group. We have the Northern Research Group. There is also now the Cultural Whatever Group. So that's at least four different groups, all with very differing objectives. And the leader, should we say, of the Northern Research Group is a guy called Jake Berry. And he is pretty much a very harsh and true Thatcherite. This is a guy who thinks that he can somehow convince Boris Johnson to spend just enough money to keep the Northern voters happy. The problem is that along with that money comes a lot, and I mean a lot, of very true and very known about Thatcherite policies. And trust me, when you say the word Thatcher to anyone, or you ask someone's opinion of Margaret Thatcher in the North, you ain't going to get a good response. You're probably going to get a lot of swearing. In fact, you will probably be very hard stressed to find anyone who actually likes Margaret Thatcher in the North. So for the Jake Berry to start trying to ship around Thatcher, what are known as Thatcher 2.0 policies, means that the second this, and trust me, where the next election, the first thing Labour needs to start doing is going, those are Thatcher policies. And a second everyone in the North associates that's a Thatcher policy, the red wall will just be rebuilt instantly. So this is something that we have to start hammering home. And indeed is something we are going to start hammering home today. Before we jump into that, please do remember to hit the like and share button. Also down below there is a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me a coffee. There is also a link to my Patreon page as well. And we'll jump straight into it. So this comes from the Yorkshire Bylines, and the title is Thatcherism 2.0 will not help Jake Berry hold the North. In an op-ed for The Telegraph at the weekend, Jake Berry, chair of the Northern Research Group, and Nick King, former chief of staff to Sajid Javid, and also co-authors of a new report for the Thatcherite think tank, the Centre for Policy Studies, entitled A Northern Big Bang, we've already slightly discussed this, wrote this. In 2019, millions of Northern voters broke with tradition by voting for Conservatives, in many cases for the first time. Those millions of people in the North were voting to leave the European Union, but they were also voting for change. Yet, when you read the recommendations in their report, it is not clear so much about what change or any more at the same time. Berry's programme is one of deregulation to open the North up to private investment, including deregulating in any investment in the North from companies' tax receipts, covering up to 10% of private investments in the North to mitigate risks, fast-tracking the approval process for applications that generate over 100 jobs and automatically approving them if the process takes over 2 months, giving the instructions and options of having projects approved by central government rather than local authorities if an investment is to make over 2 million or if it is scheduled to create 250 more jobs. Now, this is quite possibly the very worst time to be considering cutting corporation tax in the UK, particularly in the North, when councils like Leeds and North Yorkshire are on the verge of bankruptcy. Both central and local government are in dire need of funds. Meanwhile, the UK has already one of the lowest corporation tax rates in Europe. This proposal would therefore simply transfer money away from local authorities into the private sector. Likewise, Berry plans to deregulate the private sector are not only fiscally irresponsible, but also actively take power away from local councils. Local authorities should have the option to whether or not to accept investment, particularly from larger companies envisaged in this plan. In fact, he is a very, very good example of this, and a very sneaky one. Many of you may or might not know of the courier firm Hermes. Now, Hermes were in talks with Barnsley Council to open up a new distribution centre. And out of nowhere, before these plans had even been approved, or even the first meetings had even been had, Hermes went out and released a press release to basically say, we are coming to Barnsley, we are going to create all these hundreds of new jobs. Isn't it grand? The only problem is, Barnsley Council had no idea this was being released. And how do you think this makes Barnsley Council look? It makes Barnsley Council look awful if they actually reviewed their plans and we don't think that it's worth us having this in this town. So essentially, Hermes put the town in an absolutely god-awful state to a point where they were like, well, we have to approve them now. And there was nothing that they could do to even reject the application. So it's not just if you deregulate these things, they will just force their way in. There are other things in. Here's the thing. One of the things that Barnsley is so trying to do at the moment, and I think it's a good thing, they are trying not to let too many big companies in. Because the problem is, if you let too many big companies in, your town becomes reliant on that big company. So if that company decides we're just going to up and go, that could be hundreds of thousands of jobs gone overnight if they decide to up and go. And then this leaves that company in such a position of power that it can just go around and say, yeah, we want to expand it, or else we'll cut jobs. That's the type of power that a lot of these companies can exert on local councils. And we need to change that power dynamic. And like I say, Jake Berry's proposals here would only put more power in the private corporations. And they will run roughshod over local councils, as I've just given that example there. Anyway, there we go. So anyway, it continues. These plans have been roundly criticised by northern leaders. Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham said, "We need this like we need a hole in the head." While West Yorkshire mayoral candidate Tracy Barman commented this: "We've been promising a northern powerhouse and levelled up now, and a northern big bang. It's just one complete hollow phrase and broken promise after another." His system has also some pretty significant loopholes. Say, for instance, a developer wanted to get a project approved against the wishes of the local residents. Under Berry's proposals, the developer would be presented with two additional options. Either they could literally inflate the number of job estimates created by their plan to over 100 and wait out the clock on the 2-month period is over, or they could go to Westminster and get it approved there. In both instances, this reduces the integrity of the process and reduces local accountability and increases the potential for greater corruption. And given the government's current track record for holding our contractors, handing out contractors to donors with no experience in this area, this second loophole raises some serious questions about what the Conservative donors could get away with imposing on the North. Now that we have seen what the NRG is advocating, a clearer picture emerges from Berry's policies. Rather than the new voice of the Northern Conservatives, he seems to be combining existing neo-Thatcherite agendas with culture war strategies, which worked out for the party in 2019 to appeal and then retain culturally conservative voters. These can be seen as Berry's current twin Pete, in a video of him attacking the NHS for using the term chest feeding rather than breastfeeding as, quote, woke nonsense. In the past, he has used speeches in Parliament to draw fake dividing lines between the South and North culture, seemingly keen to embody the anti-elitist governance grievance culture, which is completely ridiculous because, as we said before, anyone who uses this anti-elitist culture has got to remember, when you get into power, you are now the elite. You are the ones in charge. And as we've said before, the Conservatives has such a large majority, they can pretty much do anything they want. So remember that, people in the North, when you go to the polls, please, next time. So Berry seems to think that Northern voters can be distracted by a few fig leaf appeals to Conservative values and regional inequalities, and not to notice his radical plan for deregulation. The last Prime Minister to underestimate the Northern voters in this way was Margaret Thatcher, and as a result, the Conservatives lost over half their seats in the North. Perhaps if Berry's programme gains any sway in modern-day Conservatives, they will also suffer a similar fate. And we can only hope so. We can only hope so. But, yeah, like I say, we've heard this before, like the Northern Big Bang, the Northern Powerhouse. And I've said before, the Northern Powerhouse, if they had actually done it, was actually a good idea. The problem is the Conservatives just don't want to spend the amount of money they actually need to get the North working. And even then, they are really averse to it because, like I say, the North in general is pretty much a traditional Labour stronghold, and they don't want to give Northern voters that type of reward, even though, again, MPs should be thinking in the best of national interest, regardless of even if their constituency does or doesn't benefit. And even though, again, I do agree MPs going to bat for their local constituencies is a good thing, sometimes if, for example, a Southern MP should vote in favour for economic proposals that would favour the North, because then they can argue, well, if that works so well for the North, then we can get it down in the South. And indeed, the original plan, if you go all the way back to the beginning of it, the original plan for the Northern Powerhouse was to get it to roll out and over 10 years do a study of it, how it worked, what didn't work, what could have been done better, and then to roll out a similar scheme in the rest of the countries. So there wouldn't have just been a Northern Powerhouse, there would have been like a Midlands, there was talk of like the Scottish rejuvenation plan at the time, all these things that were, again, essentially good, but the Conservatives just did not want to put the money into them because, again, how does this benefit them politically? Doesn't. And as a result, I keep on saying this, but the next general election, the 2024 election, should be the easiest general election Labour has ever to fight. But I worry Labour is going to drop the ball. I worry that it is going to be a hung parliament. I worry that the Conservatives are just going to hang on there, although be it with a very, very slimmer majority. And this is why we have to talk about the election and policies for Labour. Even though the election does seem like a long way off, it is best now to start talking about them, to start talking about the problems the Conservatives are doing, and start to talk about how a Labour government can fix these things. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. Also, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And thank you to all those people who do support the channel that way. And, as always, we'll see you all next time.